Welcome back to Together We Can's monthly action items. My name is Rob Crane. I'm a personal injury attorney in Dallas, Texas, and along with my friend Pastor Richie Butler, we are co-founders of Together We Can. This month is Black History Month in America, and we go back in history to the decision of the Supreme Court in 1954 of Brown versus the Board of Education, which is really a shift in America. Although Brown versus Board of Education dealt with an issue of whether or not it was constitutional for public schools to be segregated, it was really a case about the doctrine of separate but equal, having separate facilities for white Americans and then separate facilities for non-white Americans. And that concept of separate but equal had essentially been ratified in the Supreme Court case of Plessy versus Ferguson, which had been decided in the late 1800s. In the Brown case in 1954, the court unanimously agreed that the idea of separate but equal is inherently unequal and ordered that public schools be integrated. But by knocking down the concept of separate but equal, it not only integrated public schools, but it also dismantled that justification for so many Jim Crow era laws that provided for segregation in America. And of course, this was not immediately welcomed with open arms by all Americans. And there continued to be violence and pushback in response to this decision. And schools in parts of the country had a difficult time integrating. And two of the more famous examples, or more historical examples, really continue to provide the stepping stones in our walk in this country towards equality. And of course, it happens with so many heroes, so many courageous individuals of color who take their personal safety and set it aside for not only the betterment of their lives, but the betterment for so many Americans who had been deprived of equality. So we look at the Little Rock Nine, who attempted to enroll at Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas, in the fall of 1957. And it took President Eisenhower issuing an executive order to have the National Guard escort them in to be enrolled. And you'll see that story. And it is then followed up in 1963 by a very similar story at the University of Alabama, where though many qualified applicants had attempted to enroll at the University of Alabama, they had all been rejected. And in the summer of 1963, two courageous individuals attempt to enroll, they are denied, and President Kennedy then issues an order for the National Guard to escort them into the school for enrollment and attendance. And that evening, President Kennedy delivered his famous civil rights address from the White House, which was a historical moment for him in his presidency, but also a shift as well in his politics and embracing the civil rights movement in a way that he had not before, and really set the stage for the later passages of Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act in the 60s during the presidency of Lyndon Baines Johnson. But in the context of these historical events, we see the struggle, we see the courage to overcome and then to take us a step forward. And it's a struggle that we continue today. We take for granted, I think, at many times, or at least I know I do, that Brown versus Board of Education was only decided 68 years ago, less than a lifetime ago. And for anybody to believe that a society can immediately disband all discrimination and change all attitudes and hearts within one lifetime after nearly 200 years of living in a segregated and racially injustice society. That's a difficult concept to understand and think could actually play out. And so we continue this walk in the aftermath of really decisions that happened very recently in our history. And we reach out in our last element this month to note this segregation that still exists in many of our communities and in our schools today. Though not legal segregation, it is a reality that continues. And the disparities in those schools and those communities from that segregation are reminiscent and, very much the same as those disparities that occurred previously under legal segregation. So a great month of history, of historic, courageous figures in our nation's history and walk towards equality, as well as a reminder of the challenges that we still have. But it's one where we need to celebrate these historic moments, and I'd be remiss if I did not mention that the current president has vowed that he will appoint an African-American woman to the United States Supreme Court. And I appreciate there are a lot of politics on those kinds of statements, but regardless of politics and opinions, the fact that we may have the first African-American woman serving on the United States Supreme Court just 68 years following the decision of Brown versus the Board of Education, though it should have happened many years before with so many qualified candidates, it looks like it may happen. And when it does, that is something to be celebrated in America. When it happens, whether it may be delayed, whether it may be something that should have occurred years ago, we need to take these moments and these steps and celebrate those, and then search and yearn for those next steps on our journey towards that great declaration from our Declaration of Independence that all men and women, I'll add, are created equal. So we hope you enjoyed this month's action items, and we hope to see you again next month.